there.
There you go.
You got it.
No. I accept what you said, 164, A, I pick A, I did not look at the answer. I was training.
Well, A was the answer.
Huh?
A was the answer.
No, I picked the right answer.
Okay.
I eliminated you did B, C,
Okay.
and D.
So I don't quite understand what your question is.
No, I don't have more question, but I disagree with the answer. Because I don't see anyone in any situation getting away with it.
Let me ask you a stupid, can I ask you a stupid question?
Huh?
Did I just read three exceptions to you?
Yeah, like I said, I accept what you said. Okay, done. Because the law says so, then it's okay.
Like saying, well, the speed limit was 35, but I think it should be 36, so I'm gonna go 36. One thing that's very important, and I'm not picking on him, even though I am picking on him. The law, well, that's why I go back to the mom routine that I do. Mom doesn't give a shit if you think it makes sense or not. It is what it is. Now, it would make sense if you went back in history and the point in time that these statutes that we talk about were created. But we don't understand or know all the circumstances that created these. All we know is this is what it is now. And until they change it, this is what it is. All right, any other questions before we get started? It's amazing, we just keep melting away.
Swimming the odds.
That's more than two nights and an hour. Dead. All right, I hate to start. All right, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to page, to chapter 10. Now, what I'd like you to do is put your pencil or pen in the groove of the book and close the book. Right, keep your notebook, your notepad out. So I guess you need your pencil or pen. I don't want you to try to follow me along in the book. It's going to be very confusing if you. Yes, I got it. Thank you. All right, let me set up this method before we get into doing anything with it. This method did not exist, or does not exist, in the original 13 columns. The reason being is, this method didn't come along until after those states had already been established. I didn't realize where in the country it first started until I read something in my daughter's 10th grade history book. It was the Northwest Territory is where they first used this method. Anybody tell me where the Northwest Territory is?
Washington.
Oregon, Washington State.
No, they did not exist.
Are they
West of the Mississippi.
Indiana,
Okay.
Ohio,
Yeah.
that was the Northwest Territory. Until we acquired everything from the Mississippi to, except for Texas. Texas was a different story.
Texas was a struggle.
Mhm. If you've ever been in the Midwest, you'll notice that things are very much blocked off. There's squares, there's rectangles, there's definite shapes. The government survey can create 3 shapes: squares, rectangles, or triangles. This method is like a puzzle. It is typically used in large acreages. So the odds are, when you go home tonight to your residential subdivision, you probably, may not be looking at government survey, although that's not really true. A lot of our legal descriptions, especially in the residential subdivisions, actually are a combination of all 3. They use the government survey to bring it down to the subdivision. They then use block and lot to lay off the blocks and the lots. And then they use meets and bounds to identify the boundaries around those lots. I know when I look at my survey, it shows 3, and the one that's in the book that we'll take a look at actually has all 3 methods, so it's a combination thereof. This method is a grid, which means
A lot of people don't want to.
Yes, question.
It's a 90.
Visualize a piece of graph paper. What do you have there?
Square,
Squares, which can be broken into
90. Triangles.
triangles or
Rectangle.
rectangles. What is a square? It is a rectangle with 4 equal sides. That's why in here, a lot of times they won't refer, they'll refer to what looks like a square as a rectangle. But that's not an incorrect statement, because a square is a rectangle. So to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing.
David, I have to disagree with you on that. How can a square rectangle is 2 long sides and 2 short sides?
It's 4 sides.
Yes, but.
The only difference between a square,
But it's a big difference.
and there's only one difference between a square and a rectangle, and that is that a square has equal sides.
Exactly, and the rectangle don't, that is very different.
But it comes under the category of a rectangle. Doesn't matter.
It does. How could something with 4 equal sides?
No,
and
because
something with-
the concept is that you have the rectangle and the shape is, I mean, 4 equal sides or different, but it comes into the rectangle concept. Right. Mother said so, right?
No,
No, okay.
my 3rd grade math
Math.
teacher. But I guess with this new math, maybe it's different, I don't know. I've seen some of the stuff that kids have to do now. I had a hard time getting as close as it was. I'm getting worse now. Okay. If you're gonna create a grid, what's the first thing you would do?
Start in the center.
You'd have to have a reference point, would you not? question. Would every type of legal description have some place it starts from? And ultimately would have some place it winds up? Because we know that in defining what a legal description was, it was something to describe the boundaries. Now, you told me, in order to have a graph or a grid, I had to have squares. That means I have to have vertical lines and horizontal lines that are equal distance apart. Because you also told me it had to be a square. Now, that little dot has to be somewhere. I assume in the state of Florida. Where would that little dot be?
Orlando.
Now, logically, you would say Orlando. However, the little dot is in the capital city, which is? Okay, so that's Tallahassee. That means we are over here someplace. Because if I'm not mistaken, we are south and east of Tallahassee. Just wild guess.
Well, yes.
That's an upside down L.
So, what direction is this?
East.
Southeast.
Southeast. What direction is that?
Southwest.
Southwest.
What direction is that?
Northwest.
Okay, now, most of Florida is southeast, would you not agree? If I'm going for my reference point, most of Florida is southeast. Would it make sense that these lines would have names? Would it make sense that these lines have names? Say yes. This one's called the principal meridian. Don't pick up your pen. And this one is called the baseline. Baseline would have to be horizontal. I think.
How do you call that one, sir? An
Principal meridian. In order to answer just about any question from this method, you have to understand this. So, I'm going to give you two sets of notes, so hopefully you will. Drop your pen or pencil. Find your scratch paper. Yes. Oh. Everybody ready?
No.
All right, you gotta pay attention, you can't be talking. If you didn't get it, ask me, don't ask somebody else, because that means you're totally lost with somebody else. The principal meridian is the main north-south line that divides the east from the west. would there have to be other lines here and here that were vertical?
Yeah.
One little vertical.
Now, second part of the first note. This, what I'm about to tell you goes with what you've already written down. Range lines, I'm sorry, just the word range. Ranges are vertical You got vertical? Vertical strips of land that are 6 miles wide, 6 miles wide, either east or west of the principal meridian. Now, the 2 notes you just wrote,
The last one was principal meridian.
I'm sorry?
The last sentence was.
Yeah, north, east, divides the east,
Either east or west.
that's of the principal
Of the
meridian. What I just had you write down, is that the visualization of it? Yes or no?
So the distance between one of those lines to the next is 6 miles?
Yes. So in other words,
It's
this
basically a bunch of 6 by
Gotcha.
6 by.
is 6 miles. Which means every one of the other ones, in theory, are 6 miles wide. Now what? Give me one word to tell me what I have to do now. Horizontal, that's the word. We just did vertical. In order to get the square, I now have to do the what? Horizontal.
Parallel line.
All right, here we go. This should sound pretty much the same as what we said, except for flip-flopping the directions. The baseline,
Write this down?
yes, this is your second set of notes. The baseline is the main line that runs east and west and separates the north from the south. Well, if one of them's east-west, the other's gotta be north-south. So if I get one of them right, I automatically got the other one right. Because if I get that the principal meridian is vertical and everything is east or west of it, then I've got the other side. Because the other side then would have to be, the baseline would have to be horizontal. And it would divide the north from the south. So let's think, or try to. So in reality, this is what the state of Florida looks like. Looks like somebody dropped a piece of graph paper on the stick. How far apart
6 months.
are these horizontal lines?
Six.
Why?
Equal.
Yes, square.
Right.
The square.
If they're not 6 by 6,
Equal
they're not a
size.
square.
But what's the name of those lines? The baseline is the principal, but what's the name of those lines?
I haven't got to yet.
Okay.
All right, tell me what I've given you so far.
The baseline is the main line that runs east, west, and separates the north from south.
Okay. All right, that's very similar to the other one, except the directions are changed. All right, here's the one for the baseline. Here we go. Township or tier lines. Township or tier, T-I-E-R.
What was that? I'm sorry.
T-I-E-R.
Yeah, tier, like the tiers of the cake.
Okay. What's the sentence?
Township or tier.
Township or tier lines. Oh, no, forget the line. I gotta do it like the other one.
Do we still keep the word tier?
Township
Or tier.
or tiers are vertical, I'm sorry, horizontal strips of land
Or what, I'm sorry?
are
Sample.
Tiers of lines. Strips of lines.
no. Townships or tiers are 6 mile,
Or horizontal.
are horizontal strips of land that are 6 miles wide. I keep the wording the same.
6 miles, what?
Wide.
Right. 6 miles wide. Strips of land that are 6 miles wide.
And are either north or south of the baseline. Just like ranges are 6 miles. So far, we've gone from the state of Florida to a 6 mile square. Because in theory, all of those squares are 6 miles by 6 miles. So we really sliced up the state big time. But we still got a long ways to go because a 6 mile square is 23,040 acres. Which means if you owned that much and it wasn't swampland in Florida, you wouldn't need to be here. Not even just for the fun of it.
How many acres is that? 26?
23,040 acres. One of those squares. Pretty nice commission. Here's a question for you. Now, each one of these squares is known as a township? So, how big is the township?
6 by 6.
6 by 6.
Square miles.
So, which one of these two answers, both of them being correct, would be the better answer?
The one with the 6 in it.
They both, no, well, they both have 6s in them.
I go with the one that
The
just has 6.
36 square miles.
36 square mile.
How many of you say 6 miles square? I didn't ask you which one was right. I asked you which one was more accurate. They're both correct answers.
6 miles square.
How many of you say 6 miles square is a better answer? How many of you say 36 square miles? Let me ask a question. If you have something that's 4 by 9, that's 36 square miles. But it's not a 6 mile square.
Yeah.
So the better answer is that it is a 6 mile square. That has 36 squares that are 1 mile each in it. Those are called sections. We'll get there.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
This one starts, the grid starts with a point. Do you have to define that point?
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's a brass plate in the road up in Tallahassee.
But here we're not gonna define that, just gonna say Tallahassee.
Yeah, just like we did with the monuments. And in order to understand this, you will understand it better when you graduate from surveyor school.
How long it takes?
Rest of your life, probably.
After this, I'll hear my
Now, I have questions. What if my property is in that section? What would be the first thing, I did the grid, that was the first thing. What would I do now to get closer to my property? That's 2.5 acres.
Second township,
I'd need to do what?
below the.
I need to break down the township into smaller pieces. But guess what? How do I know which one?
With the basin and the meridian. You can-
Now, we know that this is always our reference point. If we're talking about ranges, this would be range 1, this would be range 2, this would be range 3, this would be range 4.
That's like negative though, right? And then the other side is the same numbers.
Yeah. Am I missing anything here?
Yeah,
Because
the,
he told you the same set of numbers are on the other side. So my question is, am I missing something? And what is it?
Northwest.
West! Your notes don't say northwest, your notes say west. Now, I'm gonna take a wild shot. That this one is range 1 east, and this is 2 east, and this is 3 east. So, how do I describe that township?
R2 east,
you have to.
R2 east,
B,
I'll just say right out.
go ahead.
You need to put the T's down on the left side,
No,
do you want to put the other?
oh, why do I need to do that?
because
This would be township 1. North.
north,
And this would be township 2, oh, I'm sorry, 1 south. This is tier 2 south. 2 south.
And then what you would do
This
is
is
you would
range
go,
of tier 3 south.
then what you would do is you would go R2 east, T2S.
You always start with the tier.
T2
Tier.
south.
So this would be tier
Tier 2
T2
R2S.
2 south,
Yes.
range
R
3 east. That is the only place in the state of Florida that that range and tier intersect. They do not intersect anywhere else in the state of Florida. That's how you identify the 6 mile squares, by the tier and range it's in. So if you can't draw the grid, you can't answer this question. And then you can't answer the next question. And then you can't answer the next question. Why? So the most important notes that you wrote down tonight are what you've already written down. You need to go home and practice creating what's on that board.
That's gonna be a question in the test.
That's probably a pretty good chance.
It's like laying out a room for a house.
Yeah?
Yeah, I guess you're right.
All right, let's try another one. What's this one?
First, what is the range 3?
T
To the T1
north,
north
R4 west.
and R4
Decimal
west.
points?
Where's the X?
Why is range 3 is? Because where ends?
R4 east, R5.
I know, I understand that. The thing is,
But the
Where the
second
point is.
line, R2
Second.
Ah, because he made.
Yeah, I got it in the wrong
Oh,
place.
yeah,
It's okay.
So it's R2
Now, did we make a mistake in identifying the township that the property was in?
Yeah.
Yes, I did, I put some.
That's what he was talking about.
yeah.
It's the, range 3 east this way.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's
It's
2.
two.
It's the
R2
tier
east,
east,
R2
right?
east.
Because it's still on that horizontal, but it moved over 1 range. Question? So you have to be able to draw the grid, get your ranges and tiers set up,
Of all those?
and I have to be able to locate the township. Because what they'll do in a question is, they'll give you the description of a given township, and then which means now you have to draw it on the grid. And then they'll say, go 3 tiers north and 4 tiers west. Or go 4 ranges west. Which means you have to figure out which one of the squares they are, and you'll have the corresponding answer. Because you'll have 4 answers, tier range, tier range, tier range. If any of the answers start with range, what do you do with them?
That's wrong.
Throw them out. So if you've got a question and you had 3 ranges and 1 tier, question's over.
Probably think tier first.
Because tiers always come first. You always do the horizontal before you do the vertical. Now, if you want to know why, you're going to need to talk to the people who in the 1800s were in charge of doing this.
Why not care better?
If you can't talk to them, I can't help you. So if the word why is falling off your lips, just remember who you're asking. No? What don't you understand?
I don't know, everything.
Everything, okay? Make sure you get your note.
I will, thank you.
All right, let's run to the point where we are now. The first thing we always look at are our main lines that break up the state. Our principal meridians, which are vertical, principal meridian, and the baseline is horizontal. Everything feeds off of those two lines. Everything east of the principal meridian, that is a vertical strip, is east. Everything on the west side of it would be west. And here, the baseline divides the north from the south. So any tier up here would be north, and any tier down here would be south. Very simple.
Each square is 6.
I'm sorry?
For her benefit, explain the 6 miles for each of the.
Yeah, all the squares are the same. They're all 6 miles by 6 miles. Anybody else? Okay, let's continue. Because I'm trying to find a piece of property that's only 2.5 acres. Which means what? I'm still a long ways away. So let's do this. Let's pull out this township. This is this part. What I'm about to show you would look the same in every square, at least in theory. Now, we said that this is a 6-mile square. And then I said that has 36 squares that are 1 mile each. So how many pieces are we going to divide this township in? 36. And each one of them's going to be? A mile. Okay. Now the question is, we have 4 corners that we can start from. Which one?
The southeast one.
Nope.
The one that's closest to the meridian and baseline intersection, which would be,
No.
no?
You said northeast? Why? I'm sorry? Has nothing to do with the grid. So you basically never stood right. What it had to do with is all the surveyors that were sent out to do the surveys of these properties came from the northeast. So when they got out to where this is starting, where would be the logical place to start your first township? In the northeast corner. So there is a logical reason for why they did it. But see, if I didn't tell you that, you'd always question, well, why did it start in the northeast corner? It could have started anywhere.
Yeah, the concern.
So now we know. Okay, so this would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
24, that's not how you're supposed to say it. 24.
Mommy, it's been a long day.
You're right about that. 25, 6, 7,
That was like a lighting painting.
3, 4, 5, 6. where would section 1 be? Northeast. What would 6 be? Northwest. What would 31 be? Southwest. And 36? So if they ask me where section 1 is located within the township, the answer is always northeast. All right, how about this? What about the 2, 3, 4, 5 that's up on north? Where is it? All of these are on the north side, so where are they? North, thank you. You'll catch on to this in a minute. And the 4 that are on the south side would be, and the 4 that would be on the west side would probably be, and the 4 on the
East.
okay. Being familiar with direction is really helpful in this chapter, isn't it? What about the ones in the middle?
Center.
What about the ones in the middle?
Oh, the base.
Where are they?
Base.
In the middle! I sat here and said, what about the ones that are in the middle? And you looked at me like you don't have a clue. I know my accent's pretty heavy sometimes. That's because you're looking for the, trick. There is no trick. It's exactly what you see. But I'm not good at math, so I'm probably not looking at it right. Who told you were bad at math? Some teacher when you were in elementary school. And that person should be flogged. Then there's the teachers that taught you the concept. And once you understood the concept, the arithmetic got a lot easier. I'm going to take a wild guess that they're probably not going to ask these. Odds are they're going to ask the ones on the perimeter. But it doesn't matter, because you're going to go home and practice that. Yes, it's in the book, but you're going to go home and you're going to practice that. Now, here's a question for you. What section is due west of 18?
West of 18.
Mhm.
Different township. Yeah,
That's why I ask. I know it's in a different township, thank you. I want to know what section it's in.
13 over the other.
13. On this one over here. In other words, if you look at it here, and you got 1, 6, 31, 36, and they're asking you what's due west of 18, it would be 13. And that, what would be due south of 31? 6. That question is looking to see that you understand that every township's numbered
Okay, I
exactly the same.
got it. Now I got it.
And if you realize that, then that's an easy question. But it all goes back to the ability to draw these two things. So if you don't take some time practicing with those, these questions are going to be still easy. Now, you may want to make a note, even though it's in the book, a section is 640 acres.
600. And what section?
640 acres. You had a question?
She was asking why it was 13.
Why it was 13? Because it's in the next township over here,
Dale, did you say?
and that would be on the east side of that. Now, yeah, and people, I should have said it, because a lot of people think, well, why did they go in the state pattern? Here's why. These guys didn't have 4x-wheels and helicopters. They had horses and wagons and feet. So it made a whole lot more sense when they got to 6, not to go back and start over again, but to drop down and come back. Like I said, when you deal with something that's mathematical, there's always a reason for it. There's gotta be a basis for it. So, we said that our property was in this section. Right here. But that's 640 acres. And I said the property we're looking for is 2.5. So we have no problem. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna take section 36. And blow it up. Oops. And then on the square. There's the section. How many acres? How many acres? That is a very important to remember, number to remember.
How much was the one for the township?
23,048.
048.
Sections by 8 sections, 23,048.
No,
Eight lines by 8 lines.
6 by 6 by 6 by 6.
it's 6 squares by 6 squares.
That's a section.
That section's 1 by 1. This is 6 by 6. The section is 1 by 1. Because there's 36 sections in something that's 6 by 6.
So they just break it down to a scale. Each little box is 640 acres. Each little box is 640 acres. Each square, 640 acres. Each little square.
Yeah, I just think
Okay. I just wrote the legal description for that property on the board. That's 2.5 acres, somewhere in Florida, probably not far from Tallahassee. Because the smaller the numbers that you get when you look at your, the page, gets you closer. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we're right here. Because we started with Florida, we dealt with the range and the tier, and we're down to section 36.
Yeah.
Now, we now have to break down section 36 based upon that northeast quarter, the southeast quarter stuff. Now, however, For those of you that are from a culture where you write from right to left, this will be much easier for you. For everybody else, it will be a nightmare. If you notice, I started over here. My answer is over there. Now, here's what we're going to do. Starting with the word section, because that's where we're at, you're going to tell me what the next word or number is in this. So, what's the next thing you see after the word section?
Southeast quarter.
Southeast quarter is 2 letters and 2 numbers. I said I want 1.
Off quarter.
I can't see
Four.
what I'm saying. It looks like a 4 or an 8.
4.
It's a 4. So the first thing I would do is what? The 4 is right there.
It's like reading.
I'm reading backwards. I told you, those of you that read from left to right, we're going to be lost.
But that is a fraction.
What's that number?
4.
What's that number?
4.
You sure?
Yes.
Quarter.
No, I didn't ask you what the next number was. I asked you what that number was. I said 1 number or 1 letter at a time. Which part of that don't you understand? You get this, it's a piece of cake. You don't, you're gonna choke on it. 640 divided by, okay. Oh, maybe that's what it means. Did I just divide the section by 4?
Yeah.
How many of them 4 parts do I want? 1. Which one?
Southeast.
That means it ain't here. Okay, so now we're here. What's the next thing you see?
4.
4.
I'll take a wild guess.
And divide it in 4.
Okay, and what's next?
Northwest.
No, next is 1.
1.
Which one? So notice I'm slowly doing what? Straightening it down. What's next?
4 again.
Oh!
Oh. So
But
that sounds.
but before you didn't count the offs.
You wanted a number.
That number is?
4.
That number is?
1.
And they want?
Divide it again.
Southeast.
4. And then the
Okay. And then the up, and then
4 again.
4 again.
And
Wow.
northeast.
And northeast. Is that my property?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else there.
Yeah.
Really easy.
Unless you want to make up some more shit to put there, there's nothing more to put.
I don't think everybody understands it.
Yes?
Can you do 1 more of these, please?
Yeah. What I just did, you won't have to do any test. But I will show you what you have to do. And how well you understand what we just did will determine how well you do with what we're about to do. Now, I'm going to ask something of this group. I know it won't be adhered to. It's been proven too many times. But if you screw up my routine now, I'm going to throw your ass out of here. Is that crystal clear?
Yes.
Here's the rules. Keep your mouth shut. Don't point, don't grunt, don't talk to your neighbor, don't ask me questions. Is that clear enough? Do I need to add any more into that? Okay. Better not blow my routine. All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put up a legal description, like the one we just did. But I don't want you to draw anything. All I want you to do is tell me how many acres. And you're doing that without using the mouth. When you get the answer, you write it down on a piece of paper or in your book, or I can see it, and I'll come around and look. Which part of that talking? See, I told you. I want to know how many acres that is. And I don't want you to talk. And you got about a minute. Yeah.
Sorry, can you, the cable that, I cannot see what number it is.
Now remember, I said I don't want any drawings. I just want you to calculate the number of acres. You don't need to draw anything to calculate the number of acres. You just have to go in the same direction. What's the magical number here?
640.
640. Without that number, I'm dead. So I'll give you a little help.
610.
Thought we weren't gonna talk. Write it down. And like sometime before break,
And what do you want, the acres?
I want a number of acres.
Oh, can I say?
Five.
I don't want anybody to talk. Which part of that? This room is absolutely amazing. 3 times after you talked the first time, I asked you not to talk. It must be that accent. Or maybe I need to get the whip out. another one.
That's an and.
What did I ask you not to do? What did I ask you not to do before we started this? Talk. You talked and screwed up my whole routine. Does everybody see the and? Who doesn't see the and? Raise your hand if you don't see the and. If you don't see the and, raise your hand. Which means, even if you know how to do this, you'd still get that question wrong. So for those of you that got 10, that's not the right answer. Let me ask you a question. How many of you took English grammar?
I did.
You know that a conjunction adds two separate parts together. So, math is not your strong suit. Now we know English grammar is not your strong suit. Seriously. What does an and mean? It's two thoughts, two words, two numbers. Yeah.
Are we allowed to present an answer?
Might as well, everybody else has.
1,000 acres?
How much?
1,000?
Not in your lifetime. Okay, here we go. Watch this. This is extremely complicated. I'm going to do exactly what I did up here. 640 divided by 4
It's a 60.
is 160.
It's 160.
160 divided by 2
It's 80.
is 80. But that's the end of one part. So now I start over again.
80 plus 80.
640 divided by 4 is 160. Half of 160 is 80. So the answer
It's
is
160.
160.
Oh, that's right.
Dale, can you go back over that?
Yeah.
No, this was I did.
Now,
I didn't divide it.
when you get one of these problems, the first thing you do is look for that and.
At the end, yeah.
If you miss the and, it doesn't matter if you understand how to work it. Now, we just said that an and puts two numbers, thoughts, words together. So I'd have to figure out the answer from one side, and then figure out the answer for the other side, and do what? Add them together. So I do exactly what I did here when I drew it out. I started with 640. I run into the 4. That's 160. The next thing is a 2 in this case, which means we're not dividing it into a quarter, we're dividing it into a half. And half of 160 is 80. Now, I don't need to do the other side. Why? Because hey, notice the direction has nothing to do with this. I need to know the fractions. The northeast, the northwest do not help, they would help me locate it on a map, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm just figuring out the number of acres. I don't need that. Because regardless of what this was, this answer was still going to come out to 160. 160. I didn't see the end in my class. Now, I like two places in the classroom, here or in the back. Why? Because I like to watch the people in the room. That's a disease I have from teaching for 4 years. And the instructor did basically the same thing that I did to set that up. Said our group listened. And it took me about 2 seconds to get the 10. So I'm sitting here I'm sitting in the back with a grin on my face, kind of leaning back, watching everybody struggling. And he knows that he has me by the throat, and I don't have a clue. And he says, what's the, Dale, what'd you get? When I looked up at him, I saw the ant. And I said out loud, oh shit. I had 10. Why? Because I can't read. See, I keep joking about you can't read. You just proved it. And don't tell me I couldn't see it. That excuse is too old.
I thought that's it.
You have to write it better, maybe.
My, maybe write it better? I don't think that would be.
I didn't know it was an ad or an ad.
That is ad.
Well, either one.
Maybe it's the
If
same.
it was an ad, it would be the same as an ad.
The same.
It doesn't say there was.
No, actually, this
Pass
is
them on the.
grammatically.
It's better ad.
Yes.
Do we have to look for the word add or end? That's why it says add.
A-N-D.
It says add on the page.
So it says A-N-D.
Like we're doing, like.
You can't read my writing, that's not my
Same answer.
Sure, which one I have to look for, add or end? When I put the text.
You asked me, I said and.
Right.
I set that problem up for a reason. I want you to remember it. You just got it thrown in your face. I'm glad he did it to me, because I would have missed that stuff. Because stuff like this, I would just jump right on it without doing anything and come up with an answer. Honestly, I came up with an answer before he literally got away from the board. Because you'll notice I stood in front of it and asked you questions, because I wanted to draw your attention away from it for a second.
Excuse me,
Yes.
what was the question?
The question was, based upon the following legal description, how many acres is there in this parcel of land? Or something to that effect. They would give you what you see there and ask you to calculate the number of acres.
Is a parcel the small pieces under a section when you divide it up?
Not in this language, no.
There isn't a name.
They would be subsections of anything else. Because you're breaking up the section. Now, remember I told you it only creates 3 shapes? Squares, which are quarters. That is what kind of a hand? All right, that's a rectangle. How about if I do this?
Yeah, that's a rectangle.
What's this? That is the north half. And what's that? That's the south half. What's that?
The northwest.
Northwest? Half. What's that?
Southeast.
And now I can turn it this way and do the other 2.
I have a stupid question. Is this what the told me for people is learn?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not stupid.
What's that? Come on, look at your survey. Look at the one in the book. Okay. Let's go to the bottom of page 215. Who's got the agenda? I don't know, just put any one on, we'll find it. Who's got the attendance sheet?
Yeah, on the other side.
Ah, okay. Well, Steve? You got it? Bottom of page 215. Starting line 27.
Oh, can I have that, please?
215. And then all the way down at the bottom where it says description by government survey. Put a bracket around line 27 to the end of the page. Put a bracket around around page 216. Yeah, pretty much. Do the same thing on page 217. And you see that basically the illustrations we did. Page 218. Whole page. Page, that's it, 218?
Yes.
219?
To say, the same to 8.
Page 220?
All right.
221? Two 22. All of those deal with the government survey. And it's what we did on the board. You've got some practice problems on 223, which probably would be a good idea to do. Like a really good idea. On 223, looking at practice question 15, it says the property cost $21,780 per acre. What was the cost per square foot of the property?
How many square foot in an acre?
Now, the question is, how many square feet are there in an acre? That is in the gray box at the top of the page. Where it says an acre is 43,560 square feet. $7-Eleven. When you go to 7-Eleven, you come back out with nothing. 4656 Now, that number you have to remember to be able to work problem 15. If you don't know that number, you can't work question 15. If you can, it's one step. They didn't tell me the number of acres. They just told me they paid $21,700 per acre. If I divide that by the square foot per acre, I will get what that paid per square foot.
So we need to know by,
We need to
memorize
memorize.
that 1 acre is equal to 40, the number of acres.
Yes.
The best. Okay.
So that problem at 15 is one step. Now,
You have to know the argument, all the weights
all you have to know is to divide the
What is the
square
proper,
foot per acre.
what is the proper?
No, no, no,
What is the
the
proper
next
footage,
one.
the square footage?
Talks about yards. No.
I would wait till I get the yards.
Okay.
No, that's what,
You would figure it
well,
out.
the first thing you'd have to do with question 16 is you'd have to convert the yards
Miles or acres.
Into it. No, into the square footage.
So 15.
This is a star.
How far is a quarter of a mile? How, it says 3/4 of a mile, how far is it?
I don't know.
Take 5,280 and divide it by
Four.
4,
I'm saying.
and multiply it by 3.
So AA divided by 4 and multiplied by 3. Okay.
You would take the 800,
Divided. By 4 and take 3.
no, can't do that. You gotta bring the yards down to
2 miles.
per mile.
So 1,
So the first thing, 880 times 3,
Divided.
rule of three.
sorry.
How big is a yard?
3 feet. All right, I'm gonna go back to the previous one, because that's the one I'm more concerned with. If they give you the price per acre, if I divide it by the square foot per acre, I will have the price per square foot. So they basically gave you the formula too. Now, what if they had said that you bought 10 acres? Same information, but they added that that they actually bought 10 acres. What would the answer be? Be the same answer. I don't care how many acres you buy. They're gonna be, the price per acre is still gonna be whatever that number comes out to be. So it could be 1 acre, or it could be 8,000 acres. Still gonna be the same per square foot. And they'll throw that number in there to try to get you to use it, because a lot of people, their mind is, if they gave me a number, they want me to use it. Well, not necessarily. On page 222, you gotta start.
Page 222?
Yes,
Start with.
the whole thing, because it talks about calculating
Size.
the number of acres.
222.
From 13 to the 38.
Yeah. And, no, actually, the bottom page, because it talks about the and.
And the legal Just calculating the size.
Now, the thing that has the biggest star are those 2 sets of notes I gave you. But once in all that first part will get you to the last part. You don't get the first part right, tail end, which is usually pretty easy, you're not gonna get there. All right, I think it's enough of that. But I do want to do one thing before we leave. Let's go to 224. Get on your website now. That's for the two people that hadn't opened it. Yes. 2, 3, 4. No? 2, 4. Yes, I can't see. Now, looking at the plat map, I see three things. In the lower right-hand corner, underneath that shading, see it says section, township, range?
No, I don't.
You see the shaded part right below it? No, right below it.
It's like little shade.
Yes.
That little chart that is down below.
That's government survey. Then when you come back in here, I see block A and block B. And then I've got lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you'll notice, if you look at every boundary of each lot, I see one that says north 1 degree, 10 seconds east, or 10 minutes east. And then right below it, it says 100.46, which I'm feeling is feet. So in that description of that subdivision, they used the government survey to bring it down to that, and then once they got in there, they broke it up into lots, and then into blocks, and then into lots. Once they broke it down, they used the meets and bounds to make sure the boundaries were clearly identified.
Meets and bounds. When that is not meets and bounds.
How do they deal with the curves on?
Yeah, there's something called a check that they mentioned on one of the pages. Every 24 miles, they make a 50-foot adjustment in the north-south line, principal meridian.
Actually, that wasn't my question. On this block A and block B,
Mhm.
plot 1 and 8 have curves, as do, so how do you do that with?
They work themselves around it.
But multiple directions?
Right. Which they then probably will condense into one. Fortunately, you want to learn that. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to chapter 11.
So do we need to learn how to describe this?
I just wanted to illustrate that what you just learned is not stuff to learn, actually put into practice. Okay, page 1 of the contract. Before we turn into the notes, let's start off with a couple questions. In order to be an enforceable document, a contract has to have certain characteristics. What would those characteristics be?
The parties' consideration?
Wait, what about the parties?
Confident.
They have to be what?
In agreement.
Competent, not just the fact that you have parties, they have to be competent.
In agreement.
Consideration?
They have an agreement, that's an offer and acceptance,
Consideration?
consideration,
Timing?
Oh, longevity?
Legality. It has to be for a legal purpose. In contracts that transfer the conveyance or interest in real property, in addition to the ones we just talked about, what would be the next one? It has to be in writing and signed to be enforceable. In this business, with the documents we use, if you make verbal agreements, you are a very foolish person. They're not enforceable. But they all agree. Where? Show it to me on a piece of paper, signed by the parties involved, and then it exists. Otherwise, it does not. I don't know why people have such a hard time with that. To me, it's very simple, and very clear. So what if there's an initial missing on the contract?
An initial decision?
Initial.
Maybe not part of it.
It's not fully executed.
How about a signature?
The
Oh,
signature.
no, it's not executed.
What if I have a fully executed contract, and then one party sends an email asking the other party for something, the other party says yes?
An addendum? Can you do addendum?
At that point, is that gonna be enforceable?
No. No.
Yeah, they'll take-
No, because it's already signed.
If the other party agreed,
Yeah, there will be an addendum, I
becomes
think.
part of the contract, an addendum.
Well, if you're telling me it becomes part of the contract, if I'm not mistaken, a couple minutes ago over here, you
It was
told me that
executed.
it has to be in writing and signed to be enforceable.
Yeah.
Now you're telling me it doesn't, as long as I do it after I have the contract.
Then we will have to do another contract.
No, you do an addendum and have the two parties sign it.
Okay, yeah, that is right.
Real tough.
An addendum.
See, this is part of what my job is, it's called contract compliance. When you start creating files and doing deals, I'm gonna check. And I am constantly sending back a little message that this needs to be signed, that this needs to be initialed. My favorite one, recent one, favorite one. I get an update notice, which tells me they want me to review the contract, so I go through it. And they just take a listing, so, it'll take long to go through the contract forms there. And I get to the last page, and I see that she signed, the seller didn't. So in her file, she had a listing agreement that she signed, but the seller didn't. Can you explain that to me? I can't get past the word stupid. Well, I can,
Who
but
was the one who signed?
not nice.
Did she take your test?
One of the agents.
Did she
Oh.
take your? did she
No,
take-
actually, she didn't. And she decided she didn't need training.
Oh, that one.
That one, I wish it was one.
Did she pass the test?
If you guys are gonna, those of you that are gonna be working full-time, I want you to listen very carefully. Get your ass in the training program until you've gone through it. I don't care what background you've had, I can care less. Actually, if you've had a background at least in real estate, you're dangerous, because you haven't quite adapted to a new world. I have less trouble and more deals from agents who take the time right up front to go through the training. I have agents
But the
who are
training-
constantly screwing up deals, and we're, as a management team, we're trying to help put it together. Why? Because they don't know what they're doing. Why? Because they didn't come to training.
How long is the training, Mr. Down?
Basically, the first month is all training. But if you're gonna ask me how long's training, as long as you stay in the business.
Yeah, we learn everything.
And we have classes that rotate every month, but we also have classes that come in. I'm doing a class on Friday, it's called Advanced Listing and Sales.
Can I come?
Nope. And what I'm doing is, typically, most of the discussion between the parties and the agents is the first 4 or 5 pages. From pages 5 to about 11, it's all, there's no fill in the blank, it's all pure legality. And I've seen so many disagreements between agents because they don't know that part of it. So I teach the first part, but this second part, it was amazing. I did the first class last month. And, it's like pulling teeth to get some experienced agents to come in, but I had a couple of them at least that came in, and they said, I really learned a lot. I didn't realize this, I didn't realize that. That translates to blowing deals, is what that translates to. Or screwing them up and having to figure out how to fix them, which of course is where we come into play as managers. But seriously, I don't care what anybody out there tells you. You need to be in training. Now, I understand some of you work, and that's not a possibility. We do have it on video, but it loses something in the translation. Imagine taking this class online.
No way.
You would go absolutely out of your mind. Because you couldn't ask, there was nobody to ask questions to. But seriously, to me, doing it online, there's
Who
stuff.
can argue with the computer?
He can. I guarantee you he can.
I'll talk to
He'll send emails and tell them they're wrong.
No, I'll talk to the computer. He's not going to say anything, but I'll talk to him anyway.
We know.
All right, page 230,
I like
if you will,
everything
please.
that's explained.
What time is it?
Time to go home.
It's not even 8.
Please,
Have to go home.
Stop my watch and stuff.
it's like 7:30.
Yeah, like something. All right, on page 230,
I'm waiting.
let's put a bracket around the page.
230.
230. There are certain contracts or documents that we cannot sign, and there are some that we can. On this page, and start with line 11, you'll see the list of the type of contracts that we cannot prepare. You'll notice that on the list of the ones we can, you don't see the word lease. There are 2 different leases that have been approved by the Florida Supreme Court that as real estate agents we're allowed to use. But all we can do is fill in the blanks. We can't add addendums to them, we can't make corrections to them. Unlike the sales contract where we could basically tear it apart and put it back together. And for years I've tried to understand, because to me, the sales contract is more involved than the lease. And I don't know who I was talking to, but somebody would know what they were talking about. They said in the statutes, there's a lot more information regarding the relationship between landlords and tenants. When you look at the lease looks like they've taken pieces from here and pieces from there and put them together into a contract. So in other words, that lease doesn't tell the landlord and tenant everything. That's why we have to give them a copy of the Landlord and Tenant Act. So in reality, the lease is more involved than a contract is. The contract, sales contract is designed so that we can prepare it. the lease is no. So when they say fill in the blanks, you can't, if they misspelled somebody's name, you couldn't mark through it. The landlord, the tenant, or an attorney would have to do it. They want you to do an inventory. You can't do an inventory. Unless you're tying it to what we call the contract lease. But if you're doing it as part of the lease, you can't even do an inventory. So it seems a little weird, but when you, again, when you learn the history of it and the legal basis for it, you know, it makes a little more sense. I have a verbal listing agreement. Is it enforceable?
No.
No.
What if you record the person?
Is that in writing inside? I didn't hear you. You realize that every time you ask me a question like that, you get the same answer. I only done it about 10 times and not passed the first stage. I have a 2-year lease. So the tenant and the landlord agreed to a 2-year lease. Can I prepare by filling in the blanks that 2-year lease?
No.
Yeah.
The answer is no. You'd have to do 2 1-year leases.
Oh, really?
It says it right on the lease.
Can you do it at the same time?
Yep.
Oh, because I'm in the process of, I want to do 3 years, 1 year, schedule.
Now, if you want to do 3 years, which was what my brother-in-law did, you have 2 options. First, you can do 2 1-year leases, or 3 1-year leases that start when the other one ends.
What's it again?
You create 3 1-year leases with the with an expiration date, a renewal date, an expiration date, renewal date. Or, smarter move if you're a tenant, is to do a 1-year lease with 2 1-year options. Because then, as my tenant now controls the situation, not the landlord. And that's what I did with my brother-in-law. But we gave the landlord an extra $50 each month for years 2 and 3. So, do it the first way, and you're locked in for 3 years. Do it the other way, and you decide whether you want to be stuck years 2 and 3.
Oh,
So
okay.
the option will be if he wants to stay there.
Yeah, if I'm leaving, it doesn't matter.
Oh, okay, so in my situation, I want to do.
I'll stop you right here.
Okay.
You want to know your situation, we don't do that in planning.
So, okay.
But if you want to cancel, let's say, for,
Now, did you do a 3 1-year leases, or did you do the option? 3. You have to get the landlord to let you get out. And probably have to pay a penalty.
What did your brother do? Just tell me
Option.
what are the options, the 3 1-year lease?
No, I gave him an option for year 2 with a $50 increase, and an option for year 3 with another $50 increase.
So that ties them in for 3 years.
That ties the landlord in for 3 years, not the tenant.
It's an option.
It's an option for the tenant.
Okay. And the other way, it ties the tenant.
Right.
Ah, I gotcha.
So it depends on what side of the fence you're on.
Because at the end of the 1 year, you gotta
You can
decide
give
whether
your
you're
30-day
gonna.
notice.
But here's the deal, the landlord can't kick you out after 1 year,
Oh, you
because you already have the option.
The option for like.
So unless you violate some provision of the lease, can't kick you out. Can't raise the rent more than
$50.
or whatever that number is when you put it in.
What about the commission? You're entitled to the commission.
What's your listing agreement say? His question was, what about a commission? What does your listing agreement say? Our listing agreements say that we get commissions on renewals.
Oh, it's great, you
If you have clauses that you cannot add the lease before 1 year, what happens with the commission? You know,
How you get paid?
depends, yeah.
How do you get paid? I can pay it up front. I don't care what happens after I get my check.
But there's something that you can negotiate, you know? I mean, the tenant can negotiate with the real estate agent.
For what?
If you negotiate a lease that you can get out in less than 1 year. for instance.
Right.
How would you find out?
You know what I mean? So
Okay.
if the tenant goes in 6 months,
But this is all good discussion. What if the landlord won't agree to it? As the landlord, I can only rent this place one time each year, every 365, that's the condo rule. So I only do 1 year leases. You wanna leave early, no problem.
What
You
if
pay the
after,
difference.
what if after the year you do month to month for a couple of months until the tenant decides?
At the end of the lease,
At the end of the year?
yeah, you can do that.
But what about an escape
They
clause?
raise the rate.
Does the agent still get
From month to month, they got another $20. They did that in the apartment, it was costing more than the house.
Depends on what you're listing.
I just say, oh, yes.
Okay,
I'm happy with those agreements, you guys.
huh?
You guys help us with those agreements?
Yeah, if you come training. That's what we're here for. Now, see, these are the type of discussions that we have in training. These are very applicable to a training class. Since you don't have your license yet, it's not applicable. But I still throw some in.
Dale? Dale?
1 year lease, 2 1-year options,
So 1 year.
with a $50 increase each year.
Dale,
Yes,
it's a different question, but on our schedule, the 13th is the actual last class,
Mhm.
and then we have a review class
on the 13th, or
on the
whatever day it is.
15th, and then
Whatever it says.
but then the last class.
The last 2 nights, one of them being the 20th, is the exam. The class before that is a review.
The exam is on the 20th?
Yes,
But you know, when you schedule the test for their kids and they ask that you, if you don't pass, you can't take the test. And in
Right.
order to cancel, you have to give them more than, like, 2 days notice.
I scheduled for
Otherwise,
the
we lose
21st.
them.
so then don't fail.
So I didn't.
Well, no, I mean, but I'm just saying.
Now, I want everybody to listen. We're not starting that shit. That's definitely one thing we're not getting into. Talking about failing the test. You're not screwing up my passing average. But some of you need to start learning that when I tell you something, I tell you to do it a certain way, debate is over. You want to debate, go debate with the state. You're not screwing up my passing average.
Dale, so,
Yes.
I understood that we have to register for the exam once
Yes.
we pass this class exam. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, you can register for it as soon as you're approved.
But it's not.
If you're nervous about it, make
It's
it
not-
5 days after the end of the class.
We already got an email.
I know.
An email says that we're approved. and-
Approved, not scheduled.
Yeah, that is approved, but I thought.
You
that
still
we
have to contact Pearson View, schedule a time.
We did, we had a date.
You have a date.
Yes, but it's the 21st, that's when we're figuring
Okay.
out.
That's good.
If we don't have it the 20th here.
Listen to me very carefully. I told you we're not getting into this. My highest percentage of passing is people who take it within the first 10 to 15 days. Not people who study for a month or so, because that way I'll really be ready. No, you won't. Because you don't have me screaming in your ear every couple of nights.
I'll show up.
Yes,
So it's a very relevant question. Some of us have scheduled it right after the class.
Right.
But then I was told, but you have to have a certificate that you passed your class.
right.
So how long does that take to get from you?
Right there.
The same
It's
day.
right
The
away.
same day? Okay.
Well, knowing what, if I'm not prepared to hand you a passing slip on the night you pass, and you're telling me you're taking the test tomorrow, I really screwed you up.
That's why I asked.
No, absolutely.
Has to be that.
Vote of confidence. Or lack of confidence.
Okay,
Now,
yeah,
if I fail, are you gonna tell everybody in front of the class?
yeah, you, yes.
I was just making sure, I wanted to figure that one out.
Yeah.
Look at what we do. The cities around us, let's say Jupiter or Miami, have a place to do the test.
Go online, there's places in Woolbright and I-95.
Yeah, there's one also on Oakland Park.
Right.
But what I'm
Depends on where you live.
Yeah.
Go to the Houston View website. It will show you all the locations.
It doesn't matter where I make the test, where I do the test, could be New York, right?
No, it has to be Victoria.
He didn't ask you the question, he asked me the question.
Now,
You should have said,
All right, now, I'm gonna answer his question, so I can move on. I can't answer his question if you're talking. If you're talking, I can't answer the question. Thank you. Yes, you could do it in New York, but you would have to clear that with Florida so that Pearson View would send your exam to a location in New York, which means you're not gonna be taken in New York.
I have a question.
Yes,
Is there a retest?
and as many times as you wanna plop down the $31 and change.
No, I'm doing the class, this class here.
Class test, yeah,
And I'll throw
there's
that-
one test,
Oh, one time,
yeah.
okay.
Because if you don't plan on passing it, don't show up.
Oh.
Cause it's for his average.
I'm serious. If you're gonna come in with an attitude that you're gonna fail, I don't just do it by passing that.
No, I'm gonna pass.
I'd rather have to call you and give you a hard time because you didn't show up.
Even if it's by 1 point, I'm passing.
But see, what you don't understand is, I have handed you the test on a silver platter.
You don't wanna mess with the average, mark my shit right.
And you've made flashcards for all your stars. And you're studying those. So at least you get past the class test. All right, page 231. Put a bracket around page 231. Page 232, put a bracket around 232. On page 233, put a bracket down to where it says practice quizzes.
Wait a minute, 2:30.
Now, for those of you that were talking, I don't want you asking anybody what you were supposed to do.
I wasn't talking, I wasn't hearing anything.
All right, let me repeat it. We can only do that in one way. Page 231, the whole page.
I have the reason for it.
232, the whole page, with 3 stars. Yeah, just pick a spot.
Statutes. Statutes. Okay.
All over, start.
On page 233, a bracket around line 1, 2 where it says practice questions.
I got it.
So the practice quizzes, questions aren't part of your. The star for 233 is the paragraph that says void, voidable, and unenforceable. And they have a little chart right below those couple of paragraphs where it defines valid, void, voidable,
Highlight?
Start. All right, let's go back to 231 for just a second. We already did this. We did do this. We know that in any legal document, the parties have to be confident or the document is not valid. That should not really be a hard concept. In order to have a contract, somebody has to make an offer, someone has to accept. I mean, you can run that right down to marriage. It has to be legal. Give you an example of an illegal. Agent, student actually came down from the Jupiter area. There was a young couple who rented a house, and they had a pickup truck. And one day the police showed up and arrested them. What they found out was they were pulling the vehicle in the garage, closing the garage door, and they cut a hole in the concrete. They then started digging out underneath the house because they wanted a basement so they could have a grow house. A grow house.
They didn't realize was they hit water.
A Jamaican.
So I think that lease would be null and void because it would be for an illegal purpose.
Marijuana.
That's when they talk about legality of the object.
What happened if they sell
How is that illegal?
without digging?
Well, I don't know where they're gonna have the grow house. See, they were thinking they could hide the grow house underneath the house,
Yeah.
and nobody would realize it was there.
They're
What?
related to. El
Honestly, you don't know. Okay, pages 232 and 233 are extremely important.
You said back to 233, sorry?
It talks, the first thing it talks about is something called the statute of frauds, which is very misleading because it doesn't have anything to do with fraud. It requires certain documents to be in writing and signed to be enforceable, not to be legal, but to be enforceable. Which means if it's not enforceable, it might well be illegal. Read the paragraph, it's lines 6 through 9 on 232. What does the statute of frauds require?
Enforceable contract.
It has to be signed.
What has to be signed?
A legally binding contract.
No, it's not.
I'm not understanding that that section, not to be performed within 1 year of the day.
I'm not even down to that part.
Isn't that what you?
I asked you to read the paragraph, lines 6 through 9. That's where my questions come from.
That's where I'm reading.
No, what you're just reading was 6 through 9. What you read,
Page 232. That is real property. Isn't that where we're at, 232?
Yes.
On 232, lines 6 through 9.
Yeah.
Have to be signed as the enforcement contract. Right.
So it means that if they had performed before, and yeah, you don't have to have any, right?
Now that you've had your shot of explaining it, it's my turn. Now, please, no talking. I gave you a chance to talk back and forth to each other and get out all your wrong answers. Let's talk history first. Backing up in time when property was transferred, we didn't have all the fancy technology and stuff we have today. A lot of times, the buyer and seller would meet at the property with witnesses. And the current owner would pick up twig, dirt, and hand it to the other person in front of the witnesses, thereby attesting to the fact that the property's rights had been transferred. Then they'd go down to whatever they called it, recording house or whatever, and put it on public record that they had bought the property from John Smith. Now, where's the problem with all that? As long as everything goes okay, we don't have a problem. What happens when one side feels the other side has cheated them?
Come back and hunt.
There's nothing in
Back in
writing.
day, history.
And so what happened is, they would go in front of a judge, and there'd be the seller and the buyer, and the seller's witnesses, and the buyer's witnesses. And they each had a different story that benefited the buyer or the seller. So as time went by, the courts finally realized that documents that deal with the transfer of an interest in real property, or documents that cannot be fulfilled within a year, need to be in writing and signed so they can be enforceable.
When you say
Because there was too much fraud in those type of contracts because they weren't in writing and signed.
But what do you mean not fulfilled within a year? I mean, if you have a seller and a buyer and you have.
Whoa, 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 whoa. How do you know they're talking about a sales contract?
Okay.
Any contract that deals with the transfer or conveyance of an interest in real property, if its function cannot be performed within a year, it's no longer enforceable.
You mean if it's a verbal agreement?
Be it right.
So that's why you have to do the leases for 1 year, because it has to be performed within 1 year.
Or we can't prepare it. An attorney or the owner or the tenant could draw up a full lease.
7 months.
So if it's not executed within that first year, it would just.
Which has very little bearing on the contracts we deal with. Because they're, if you're trying to think of the typical real estate contract, that's a non-issue. What's really the issue is the fact that it needs to be in writing and signed to be enforceable. That's what's important.
But if it's not executed either, even if it's signed within the first year, it could be,
Right. How many sales contracts have you seen written for longer than a year's period of time?
and they haven't, yeah, I mean, it's not executed.
There's a reason for it. Now, you realize that statute of frauds doesn't have anything to do with fraud. It's trying to prevent fraud by getting everybody to put it in writing and signing an initial agree to it. To me, it should be called the statute of in writing and signed. Because because that's really what it's about. So you understand why I get my feathers all bent out of shape when I get documents in the app files to review with initials and signatures missing.
There's nothing.
And if it's the fault of the other side, I don't care. I want that document. If you can't get that document after diligent effort, then you put a note in the file to that effect. But this is an extremely important concept. But it's simple. If it's a real estate transaction, in writing and signed, or it doesn't exist. Forget the 1 year. Forget the 1 year. It needs to be in writing. It's about being in writing and signed to be enforceable. It's not about that 1 year. Question, I've got a 6-month lease. If it's verbal, is it enforceable?
No. Nothing verbal.
It says that leases for more than 1 year fall under the statute of frauds. Well, what about a 6-month listing? Does it have to be in writing and signed? Answer is no.
No.
Is it as enforceable as if it was signed? Yes.
Yes.
That's not true of a sales contract. I can have a verbal listing agreement, a verbal lease for as long as I want to, as long as I'm not preparing it as an agent. But after the first year, if it isn't reduced to writing, it's not enforceable. That's what they mean by that. Because it says more than 1 year, it doesn't say less than 1 year. All right, one more question, and we'll take a break. I think you can probably use it at this point. A licensee in negotiating a real estate contract violates the statute of frauds. Did the licensee commit a fraudulent act?
No.
A licensee in negotiating a real estate contract violated the statute of frauds.
Yes.
Has that licensee committed a fraudulent act?
Yes.
No, they failed to get it in writing and signed for the 800th time. We can take a break if you want.
Because it's not invited. I agree, that's what they, oh my God.
Baptist just moved because the hospital and I'm treating college Baptist church.
Let me see what
I've been to church almost a year, almost a month. Are you transferred to? No. I was saying that. Because I've been not feeling well and things were not at home. I need your number. Your husband is in construction. So how do you do your study? How do you do your study? I haven't been studying.
It's probably hard, man.
Because I'm trying to learn my new work systems
But
at
the
the
hospital, he
hospital.
does say something very important. He says, just Where do you
That might be a.
I haven't read anything, because now I'm learning the new computer system at work.
What do you do when you work out?
I'm doing some night shifts at the hospital. And then my friend fractured his hip and his shoulder last week. So I'm there every night when I leave work. I go there to relieve the able to stay overnight with him, get up at 5 o'clock so I can get ready and go to the hospital. And then go back. I have no time to really do anything else. Last week I was so embarrassed, I practically fell asleep in the class. And I was doing, the week before that, I was doing shifts at manicure rehab. I was working in the rehab 3 nights per week before the
Cheer up, cheer up. Cheer up.
So, and it wasn't supposed to be like this. I have 2 classes I'm enrolled in, not just this another class. And I'm
Animal, Rio. Animal.
No,
Do you want me to go to New York?
I have a reason for that question.
that's true. I have I'm not gonna go.
No, I'm not asking for the rest.
Oh, okay.
I'm asking, I'm telling you that you want to go to New York.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I have a reason for that.
I will ask you to do the reason. Don't worry about it.
But I have allergies. Since last night I was without the shoes. And I'm kind of close to a cold.
I love this today. It's cold weather, I love it.
I love it too, but
Windy, cold. What a difference.
Yeah, I can't even feel like in a park.
I'm from Beijing. 2 years and I love it.
You love this stuff?
I
love it.
But in New York, you went to the beach. Long Island.
Nothing can be worse.
4 days.
Nothing can be worse than Beijing.
I don't know, but I've been in Beijing. But many people, right now it's not walking, right? Walking is walking, but it's ladies and gentlemen. They must have nice to meet you where I live.
One day the blue sky, everybody picture.
So yeah, to be able to see the sky. But not in Okay.
And everything.
It is, that's true. I'm gonna take, no, I'm gonna take you. What?
Taiwan, we start dating, everyone here and drive.
But your husband is American.
Yeah, but it's very, like right now,
Where is he?
he's working. So, he's gonna send me several
And then you just have to pick it. It's really not. What if it's
And my sister was still It's very hard. I mean, once your mother is that age, it's just, you never seem to.
I'm gonna have problems.
She has friends, she likes to go and hang out. She's good, she walks a lot, which is really good. It's wonderful. So thank God she's okay.
What's going on?
It's hard.
I think it was harder when I lost my dad young also, but it's sometimes
In Massachusetts,
I think it's a lot harder. Has it gotten there wider? Has it always been?
I had my license in New York.
people right across the river in New Jersey.
Remember, I took her to Canada. Very
It's easier.
No, I see.
Go time.
Even if you're 17.
It kills a deal.
Oh, well, keep trying. If you really want, right? If you're really tired. Huh? Tired. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I have a bunch of people from Boston. I gave someone last night.
Just a little bit.
Now, yes, because I have kids, but it also makes me fresh.
Sí, that way.
Yeah. I'm just gonna try my Twitter. You like Twitter?
I was in charge of social media.
Would you have a Lunchable, Mr. Jeff?
What?
You ate fast. Did you eat dinner?
Yeah.
You ate quick.
Yeah.
You got a Lunchable?
No?
This one's small.
That's not even cool. Those things are the worst things for you.
I know.
I had such, remember that night you were like, those are so, I had had one all night.
I took my photos down.
I was like, I know, I had like a gallon of Pepto.
Okay, let's continue our discussion here. Now, let me go back through this statute of frauds here, because obviously we had a lot of confusion. First and foremost, it's not about fraud. It's actually about preventing fraud. And the courts felt that the best way to do that, and which would make their job easier to ascertain which party was in fault, which party wasn't, was that contracts from our perspective, any contract that deals with the transfer of an interest in real property, in order to be enforceable, has to be in writing and signed. In other words, a sales contract is a contract that deals with the transfer or conveyance of an interest in real property. It's not illegal to have a verbal sales contract. It is stupid. Why?
Because it's
Because it's not enforceable. It's not illegal, it's not fraud, it's just stupid. And because of this statute is why I get so hot around the collar over agents that don't make sure their documents are signed and initialed. Because if I got a signature missing, what have I got? Nothing. That takes us back to chapter 8 when we talked about estates. We gotta make sure that we've got all the sellers in front of us, or at least available, if I'm gonna take a listing. Because if I'm missing one of the people that need to sign, like I didn't get a spouse to sign because she wasn't on the deed. And we get a contract time, and she refuses to sign the contract.
He's been a naughty boy.
There is no violation there.
Does the DocuSign platform has copyrights to avoid that?
Says what?
DocuSign, the platform where now you don't have.
I don't know what that is.
That they send you something and you can sign on the computer.
Yeah, it's called AppFile.
Okay, like you sign.
Yes, I know what DocuSign is.
Uh,
Now, there's a good question. What if I do it online? I don't care what program you use, but what if you do the signature online? Is that still valid?
Yeah.
It's printable.
Yeah, if you sign the terms.
Remember I told you that I have a class Friday where I'm gonna talk about some of the more advanced stuff in the contract? Here's one of them. Does the, if you were all experienced agents, I guarantee you less than half of you get this question right. Does the contract specifically address the issue of electronic signatures? Because there are now statutes out there that say electronic signatures are as valid as regular signature. Does the contract specifically address that issue?
Yes.
Where?
Yeah.
This is what I would do in class. Why? Because if you get into a tit for tat with another agent over something like that, there's documentation in the contract that shuts them down. I don't have time for chit chat. Contract says that electronic signatures are enforceable. Yes.
I also had, so when I did an electronic signature, I also had to sign previous to say it was okay, that I knew what I was signing, that it was an electronic signature.
Right. You may run into the banks. Some of the underwriters are still old folks, and they still want an original signature, which is no big deal. We print it out, have it signed, initial it, send it to them. Yes?
Speaking of enforceable contracts, you've said many times, I believe, that if a husband and wife are married and one of them purchased the property perhaps before the marriage, both of them have to sign it. I don't really understand why someone can't own property without the other.
They can.
They don't own the property.
Homestead.
They are not an owner. And the only reason they have to sign is because it's the homestead. And in the homestead in the state of Florida, there are rights that have to be eliminated. They have to be willing to give those rights up.
And that's the only thing that,
Yeah, any other property, if if the wife owned this building and she went to sell it, I don't need to,
it's
you own it
just
in your own name. You have an LLC that's just in your name. No issue. I have a 6-month lease. Is it enforceable if it's not in writing?
Yes.
Yes, you should
Yes.
say yes.
Okay. What if I had a 2-year lease? If it's verbal?
No.
When would it have to be in writing? After year one. Also on this page, it talks about statutes of limitations. I think that deals with time, right?
Yes.
You'll notice it's talking about how long a contract is enforceable for. It's not enforceable forever. If it's written,
5 years.
verbal,
4.
what if it's part verbal and part written? Part 4, part 5. Here's what that means. You're supposed to close tomorrow. But you don't. How long do you have to sue them?
Depends on the contract.
5 years. You just read it.
Years.
It's only enforceable for 5 years.
You don't know when the contract was written.
Not, it's when the contract was supposed to be performed, not when it was written. It's supposed to be performed tomorrow, because tomorrow is closing. You refuse to close. How long do I have before it's not enforceable anymore? 5 years. They're not enforceable forever. Now, if you're waiting around for 5 years to
Get your commission.
you'd be racking up a lot of attorney's fees. Don't really think that's gonna happen. So, question. Under the statute of frauds, how long is a written contract enforceable for? How many of you say 5 years, raise your hand? How many of you say none because it's the statute of limitations? And now that you know what they say now, too.
There's no 5 years?
Hmm?
There's no 5 years?
Yeah. But it's not statute of frauds. It's a statute of limitations. So the 5 years was correct, wrong statute. I know if it had been written down, you would see that. Just like, Lord. Oh, no, it's my handwriting, that's the reason you didn't see it. Next time I do that question, I'm gonna find somebody in class that has great handwriting. I'm gonna have them write it on the book.
I can tell
Like
you that it's
eliminate
not
that.
me.
On line 25, it talks about the transfer of real property. Now, we know that we had 4 requirements for an enforceable contract. Competent parties, offer and acceptance, legal, and consideration. When I see transfer of real property, what do I add to the list? Don't look. What would I add to the list when you saw transfer of real property? Handwriting and sign. Look at the list at the bottom of the page. It has 5. What's the extra one? In writing and signed. Why? Because we're dealing with a contract that transfers interest in real property. Deeds, mortgages, leases over a year. So everything here is the same as it was on the previous page when we talked about the elements of a valid contract.
Yes.
The difference is the in-writing and signed. Void, voidable, and unenforceable. What does void mean? I know it's written there, but tell me what void means.
That is not.
Empty.
Is the contract dead?
Yes.
Okay. Then what's the difference between void and voidable?
If it's incomplete,
If it's incomplete,
it's voidable if it's incomplete. If they haven't signed, they put it
a signature on it or something.
What if the,
If there are minor,
what if the buyer failed to bring the second deposit by the time that the contract's called for? Is the contract void?
No.
Avoidable?
Could be.
Right, it's avoidable. Why?
It could be void.
Because the seller may say, well, find out what happened, and if they'll put the money in, I'm cool, I want to sell my house. Or they might say, what? I didn't like it to start with. I'm pulling the plug. Which unfortunately, the seller would have the right to do it. Why? There's very few things that the seller can do that lets the seller get out. The best way for a seller to get out is for the buyer to do something wrong and breach the contract. That's the easiest way for the seller to get out. Other than that, it's a little difficult for a seller to get out. All these provisions and stuff and addendums are really to the buyer's benefit, not the seller's. Yes?
Are signatures contract written to facilitate like mortgage securing and required financing?
Say that
But
again?
if the buyer doesn't secure financing within a certain period of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Paragraph 8B. Of the as-is one-bar contract. Absolutely. But it's something we spend a lot of, on, because provisions have changed. I mean, I'll touch on it a little bit here, but.
on page,
If the seller changes his mind about selling the property, are there penalties to him?
Yeah,
Her?
To the seller?
yeah, he doesn't have the right to get out.
Do you have to sue for breach of contract? Is it
Yeah.
breach?
Yes.
on page 233, numbers 17 and 18.
Okay.
The minor may choose to void the contract, however, an adult is bound to honor the contract with the minor. What are they?
I'm your son and I'm 16. And you're 22. I had to think about that. Make sure I got the right number. Yeah. Get myself in trouble.
That's dangerous.
If he signed a contract to buy a car, he could say, I'm only 16. And that would make it voidable. You could not say that, because you're not at 22 underage.
Right.
So you're still a competent party. He's not.
So I'm obligated?
You're obligated.
You're on the hook.
You can buy a house at 16.
You buy a house at 16?
Not legally enforceable.
No.
But it says here, an adult
Unless
is bound to honor the contract if the minor chooses to go through.
Here, I'm 17 years old. I want to buy your house, or I want to lease your apartment.
I did that at 17.
And
I did it legally. No,
it says here in your notes, the minor may choose to void the contract. However, an adult is bound to honor the contract if the minor chooses to go through the transaction. Yes.
When I moved out of my house, I had a neighbor that had a building, because I lived in the city. He had a building and he had like an efficiency set up. And I mean, like, he didn't make me pay anything because he knew me from growing up. But I mean, I didn't sign anything, and I lived there until I graduated high school. I lived there 4 years.
Right.
Out of my house and everything.
Called a tenancy as well.
Yeah. So you could do that legally under the age?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought I was doing something illegal.
It's not illegal, it's
Just not
unenforceable.
enforceable.
Oh, okay.
But how
There's
is,
a difference, see, that's where you gotta realize the difference.
No, but for his part, that's what I mean, like for his
No.
part.
No.
You didn't sign
but
anything.
how is the adult
Yeah,
bound?
besides the fact you didn't sign anything.
Like you could sign.
How is the adult bound by the contract if the
Well, here's what
minor
they mean.
500 a month.
If the minor chooses not to go through with it?
I own this unit. I have a 17-year-old who wants to rent an apartment. You know, he gives me references, I speak to his parents. I'm comfortable that he's gonna be okay. So I signed and agreed to let him move in. Now, he could turn around and say, what? I changed my mind. I don't want to rent it. I'm out of here. And there's no repercussions, because he's a minor. If I said, you know what, I made a big mistake getting a minor in here and a college kid on top of it, I can imagine what that apartment's gonna look like after the parties. I'm not leasing it to you. I couldn't do that legally. Why? I'm an adult. That's what, so if he decided to go ahead with it, and I said, no, I'm not gonna do it, I can't do that. I'm bound to the lease. He's not.
And his parents
Yeah.
will be responsible, yeah?
Right. Yes.
If they're court-appointed emancipated minor, can we then,
I would probably suggest you might want to speak to their attorney first before you do anything else. Next question. Do you see what I just did? You get those type of questions. You're the wrong person to ask that question, answer that question. Somebody else has a hand? Anybody? Okay. You know? What does unenforceable mean?
You can force it, you can, it's not.
It means something's missing.
Yeah.
For example, I have a listed agreement with the agent's signature on behalf of the company, but the seller's signature's not there. That's a non-enforceable contract.
It's kind of like.
Why?
like
Because
voidable.
it's missing one of the elements.
It's also kind of voidable, you know, it's kind of the.
No, it's kind of unenforceable.
But what I'm saying is both mean the same kind of.
But you're gonna kinda answer unenforceable. Once you get to the third time. Okay. On page 234, we have some terminology here. Different legal questions and everything. The first one is the formal versus informal.
are we bracketing the correctly?
We need to bracket.
What's the difference between a formal contract and an informal contract?
One's written, one's strict, form.
How about one's written and one's verbal? Now, there are some documents and stuff that can be done verbally. They are enforceable. They're hard to enforce because it's hard to prove the relationship between the parties if you don't have it in writing. The second set are bilateral versus unilateral. What's a bilateral contract?
Two people.
No.
Two parties.
It means both parties are bound, like a sales contract.
That's bilateral.
Unilateral means only one party is bound, like an option. When we talked about the option with the second and third year, that was a unilateral obligation. The landlord had to go along with the option if my brother-in-law chose to. If he chose not to, then that makes it unilateral. How about this? I am the sales manager. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. We're out. I got all the salespeople out for their morning chit chat and rah-rah session. And I come out with this. For any one of you, for the first one of you that sells 10 units today, there's a $10,000 bonus. If one of those sales associates sells the 10 units, is the sales manager obligated to that contract? So yes, he owes the guy the 10,000.
Is that on you?
Are the sales associates obligated to sell 10 units?
No. Oh,
That's why it's unilateral.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They're not gonna lose the job, well, maybe, but the deal is if you sell 10, if you sell 9, I'm still gonna be really happy, but you don't get the extra money. I'm not obligated to give it to you because you didn't reach the full 10. Then what happens if 2 of them simultaneously sell a car? Now we'll probably have to get the owner. Because the sales managers now got themselves back up against the wall. Okay. Option contract, unilateral or bilateral? An option contract. Unilateral, bilateral? Let me ask you a stupid question. Didn't we have like a 5-minute discussion about that option?
Yeah, it's you.
If I change the parties on the scenario, it's still an option. What you will see on your listing agreement sometimes is, you'll have a situation where the seller wants to sell. But a tenant comes along and says, I'd like to lease it for a year with the option of purchasing it at the end of the year. Now, I'm locking myself into the 1-year lease. I'm not locking myself into the purchase of the property. I'm gonna ask for an option. So the buyer is not obligated, the seller is. At the end of the year, if the buyer steps forward and says, I'm ready to proceed, according to our agreement, then the seller's obligated, has to sell it. If the buyer decided, you know, what, we really like the house, but the neighborhood stinks. So we don't want to buy the house. The option gives me the ability to do what? Walk away. There's another example, but in a sales contract, buyer signs, seller signs, and both have copies. We've got a bilateral contract. At the bottom of the page, it talks about express versus implied. Which one would be better? And what does express mean?
It's the actual agreement.
It's more recent, detailed.
Yeah, details. It's expressed.
It's
He did not have a express contract with the gentleman. He had a implied. On the top of the next page, they talk about executory contracts versus executed. Bracket around the 2 of them, and you stop. No, one stop. Probably on the executory would be the star. So if you're asked about either one of these, you know which one to choose. When a contract is first signed, is it executory or expressed? I mean, not expressed, executed.
executed.
No, actually, it's executory. It isn't executed until it's performed, which would normally happen where? At closing. You'll have everybody out there say the contract is fully executed. In real life, that does mean that it's been signed. Here, executory is really the more proper term. Now, illustration. There is a certain group of people who live in the Northeast, are famous for trench coats and violin cases.
Sailor.
So if you're from the Northeast, you know who I'm talking about, but I won't use the name. In 5 minutes, that person's gonna walk in the door. Gonna open up his briefcase and take out machine gun. I knew she would say machine gun. He walks around and points the gun at this nice little gentleman right here.
First of all.
At that point, the contract is executory. When he pulls the trigger, executed.
Why me?
I'll give you 2 reasons.
I'm always been shitty, but still.
I think that's the best illustration I can give. But you have to be really from the Northeast to really get it.
Could be from Chicago.
Oh, this is true. This is definitely true. I come from Virginia, so I don't know.
Yeah, Virginia, they'll hit you from above.
Nothing happens in Virginia.
No, they'll pull the gun off the gun rack.
Yeah, one or the other.
Okay,
I had a buddy from Virginia.
on page 236. We said in order to have a contract, there had to be an offer and an acceptance, which I think we call negotiating. Let's put a bracket around, what says contract negotiation, bracket to the bottom of the page. And then first 7 lines on the top of the next page. When you talk about making an offer, who's the offeror? The buyer or the seller? The buyer. Because if I'm not mistaken, the last time you bought a property as the buyer, you were the first one to sign. But we're back to all orange and the 80s again, are we not? Okay? So I make an offer. I'm the offeror. You are the offeree, you're the seller. Now, you have several options as to what you can do at that point. 3 main ones. What are they?
Accept it.
Accept it,
Decline it.
decline it, or counter offer. That's your 3 main. There's a few more, but that's your 3 main things. If I counter your offer, does that kill your offer?
No.
Yes.
You can't recounter the offer, if you're not
I
accepting.
can, but I don't, you can, but I don't have to honor it.
Okay.
So if you offered me 180, and I said, no, the least I'll take is 175, and the buyer says, no, you can't turn around and say, okay, I'll take the 175. Why? Unless the buyer does what? Agrees. Because the minute the seller says no to the buyer's offer, deal's over. There is no contract. There's no offer. You realize in Florida, unlike a lot of states, we prepare the offer on the actual contract. People from New York and Northeast are not used to that. They don't realize sometimes that what's in front of their face is not an agreement to go to contract, and some attorney's going to prepare a contract. It is the contract. But it's not the contract until it's fully executed and delivered to both parties. It's an offer. I mean, maybe it's a little picky, but it's not a contract. If it doesn't have all the elements of it, it's not a contract. Now, let's look at some of the things. Well, we already talked about a couple of them. On line 20 on 236, let's, highlight where it says an offer is terminated by any of the following happens. Then do this, highlight each word. You've got counteroffer, acceptance, rejection, withdrawal, by the supplier, lapse of time. I gave you 3 days to respond and you didn't. Death or insanity. And the last one is destruction of the property. Because the contract does have a certain period of time. Now, these are ways that will terminate an offer. Now, my question to you is this. Looking at that list, if you wanted to see the list, look at the next page. And you've got the chart with the whole list. My question is this, and we'll vote. I want to know the best way to terminate an offer. All right, how many of you say withdrawal would be the best way to terminate an offer? Raise your hand if you think that's the best way. The second one is insanity. How many of you say that would be the best way?
That's what he
How about lapse of time? Well, that would be the best one. How about death?
That's pretty good.
Okay. How about counteroffer?
Yeah.
Okay. How about acceptance? Okay, one acceptance. Rejection? Or destruction of the property? How many of you didn't answer? Who else didn't answer? Fine. I'm not gonna tell you until they fuss up that they didn't answer.
So we have to vote?
Let me ask you a stupid question. If you present an offer to the listing agent and the seller, what do you want them to do? Accept it!
Of course.
So it's not an offer anymore, it's a contract. Yeah.
Well, that's way.
So it's acceptance.
I asked the best way. Somehow I don't find that's the best way unless there's something that I don't know.
Wait, so I got it right?
Most definitive.
Yes. Oh, no. No, it's not.
There's something more definitive than that.
Once you have a contract, your heirs are obligated to it. In this case, they wouldn't be because it's still an offer.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't want to read your documents from now on.
It
but what
says
it's not.
Andrew.
So you said that's an offer
Is
and an
acceptance.
contract? Contract because if,
Well, wait a minute. I think she asked me. What was your
So
question?
you said best way to end an offer? Or
An offer.
An offer.
That, what says it? No, it's, love doing that. Nobody's doing
I guess we
it. You see, you don't think of acceptance, why? Because termination sounds negative. If you think about it, I want every offer I ever present to be
accept.
terminated by acceptance.
Yes.
That's how you get to a closing, if I'm not mistaken.
I like that.
So there is a positive way of seeing it.
No, it's the right way to see it.
But
It's okay to see it negatively.
it's a positive outlook.
I'm not quite ready for that. All right. Bottom of the page, 237, it talks about termination of contracts. Starting at the bottom of the page, line 9, it says a contract is terminated when any of the following happens. The first one is performance. The second one is mutual rescission. Impossibility of performance. On the next page, lapse of time. And last one is breach. What's the best way to terminate a contract? How about performance?
Performance.
I hope the rest of them are negative. No in this group, you choose the negative answer. Because mutual rescission means what? The two of them agreeing to cancel the contract.
Yeah.
Impossibility of performance.
That it can happen.
And then lapse of time and breach. If you talk about a contract, I'm supposed to close tomorrow. I'm not ready to close. So we got a lapse of time unless we get an extension. By the way, when you talk about days on a contract, on a sales contract, are they calendar or business?
Business.
I don't know.
Business.
How many of you have bought a property here? Still have your papers?
I don't know.
Okay. You will answer that question for us on Monday night.
Hard to find the papers.
Not my problem.
I know that I have that, but.
Not my problem. See, that's why, here's what you're gonna do. He can't find them. He'll find mine, because I'm gonna buy a portfolio. I'm gonna make sure it has a little slit, about that long, plastic, so I can put what there? My business card. So every time he goes to his important paper, he gets to see an important person. The guy who helped him get in that house, that he's had to put $80,000 in because it was a piece of. That's the time you wanna go back into what? Pull the card out. But it's true. Very few people, if you ask them for their documents, very few people can find them. You can usually tell by walking in the house. The house looks like,
Tornado?
no. You have, house looks like a tornado, I know they don't have a clue. But you get that house where you're afraid to touch anything because it's too clean. I might get a grease spot on it or something. They have every paper they've ever had from 1923.
I have a different issue.
Yes.
My closing documents are so long, they don't fit into anything. So I always know where it is because it's on the top of the pile. Because it doesn't
Oh,
fit.
now she just told me something. Gotta remember to make sure it's legal size and not letter. Okay. The last of these ways to terminate a contract was breach of contract. Let's take a look at that on 238. Starting with line 9 through 29. A bracket, please. On page 238, starting with line 9 through 29. When either party defaults on the contract, there are 4 possible remedies. First, I can sue for specific performance, which means exactly what it sounds like. I want the other party to do what they agreed to do. That's all I'm asking for. So when I go to court, I want them to perform. The second one is liquidated damages. The best example of liquidated damage in a sales contract is the deposit. Because a liquidated damage means that it's stated in the contract what will happen if you default on that issue. So if you fail to perform the terms of the contract, the seller can always go out after you deposit. But here's the catch, in the contract, if they choose to go after the deposit, they can't sue for specific performance. So they have to decide, do I leave the money in escrow and sue for specific performance? Or do I agree to release and take the money? Can't do both. Rescission, What does rescission mean?
I know, like,
Usually means to terminate something. And then the last one is compensatory damages. That one has a star. Specifically, the sentence starts on the second line, which says usually the party suing seeks an amount of money equal to the damages, extent of loss. And typically, in those situations, whoever wins pays court costs and attorney's fees. But for an example of this, you have a family who had put a contract on a home here. They are on their way down in their U-Haul, anticipating a closing tomorrow. And then they find out that the seller failed to do something with the association, whatever, it doesn't matter what it is, but you can't close tomorrow. As a matter of fact, it's gonna take a week to resolve it. Well, obviously, the buyer at this point really doesn't have much choice. However, I can sue for compensatory damages. These are damages you have to be able to prove. You don't have to prove the liquidated because it's stated in the contract. You have to prove compensatory damages, like the extra time with the U-Haul, with a place to stay, and any other expenses that the courts will accept. 9 times out of 10, there's agreement between the parties, and the buyer will be given a credit at closing. You know, hopefully from the buyer's perspective, equal to what they had to shell out that they shouldn't have. But you'll find in most cases, most sellers are reasonable regarding that, especially if it is the seller's fault. But in a situation like that, you really do have the buyer backed up against the wall. Where are they going? If they don't have any relatives here, they root you off for a couple of weeks. No problem. All right, that last paragraph of compensatory damages does have a star.
rescission? Is that like no fault?
No, this is done by the courts.
Why?
This could happen if you sue for specific performance. And then the judge looks at it and decides that there wasn't a contract to start with. So he's gonna put everybody back to where they were before there was a contract. Or lack of contract.
So it wasn't a breach at all?
What was the breach?
It wasn't a breach of contract if there was no contract?
What was the question?
I don't understand rescission.
Oh, yeah, there was a contract,
Okay,
or they would have been in court to start with.
okay.
But the judge feels that, given everything that's happened, there's not real grounds to say that this is a contract anymore, whatever those legal issues may be. The one you're gonna deal the most with is liquidated and compensatory. Yeah, because more often than not, if you got issues, the best way to try to resolve it is to give the buyer or seller, whichever way it happens, a credit at closing. Because the time, effort, and money to go after them, it isn't worth it. Yeah, if you're talking millions of dollars, yeah, but if you're talking a few thousand, it's much better to try to negotiate and split it down the middle, whatever is reasonable in the situation. At the bottom of 238, he talks about assignment versus and novation. It should be. Assignment means what? I am transferring my rights in the document to someone else. Now, scenario. I decided to buy a property, I put down $10,000. And then I decided, you know what, I don't want this place. So, I'm talking to my brother, trying to figure out how I'm gonna get out of this. And the brother says, no problem. I'll give you back whatever you put down, and I'll take over the contract. Now, what if the contract does not state whether it is or is not assignable? That issue isn't addressed, for whatever reason. Is it enforceable?
No.
You always have the right of disposition unless the person's giving you those rights takes them away. That's why we always check may not assign on our contracts. That doesn't mean they can't assign it. It means they can't do it without both parties agreeing. Now, the novation. I want the seller and my brother to sign releasing me from any liability. That's the novation. The assignment just releases you from it, but not from the obligation of it. The novation does. It's kind of, okay. I think maybe, if you can possibly put the chairs in, if you can possibly make sure the door closes, you can go home. Which means you're never going home. Yes, you're early.